Well, we're in Joshua chapter 8 today. Joshua chapter 8. It's good to be back with you. Missed you all. Sorry I wasn't able to be here last week, but I heard great things about John subbing, and thanks once again to him. Sounds like you got kind of a real high-level view of the Bible in terms of an outline of everything, kind of following some of the same things we've been talking about. We're in that conquest period right now. I think it's always important as we study the Word of God to be able to connect back to that timeline. Like, where are we in history? I had conversations with my kids sometimes, and they're learning these different Bible stories, and it's like, well, wait a minute. Abraham happens over here, but you're saying Joshua happens over here, and sometimes it can get disconnected. And so connecting it into these time periods really helps us understand what is God doing during that time. And here we're in a difficult period of history where it's the conquest, where it's bittersweet. It's exciting that Israel is now going into the land. They've been wandering for 40 years in the wilderness because of their disobedience. Now they have obeyed. They are going into the land and conquering it. But it's also bitter because there's still some sin that has to be dealt with, and it's warfare. And so this conquest involves lots of death. It involves judgment on the people who've had all of this time. The Canaanites, God has given them all this time to repent, and they haven't. And really that is a picture of the judgment that's to come. Just like in the days of Noah, as Noah was building the ark for about 100 years, he was preaching that judgment is coming. You can get in the ark and you can be saved. And those who did not repent perished. Same thing. The Canaanites knew what was coming. Remember Rahab, who we looked at the week before last, who said, we've heard these reports. She feared God, while many others did not, and they perished. And so it is definitely a bittersweet time. Week before last, where we left off, is the Israelites had conquered Jericho, and it was this amazing victory that clearly God did. It was not a military stratagem. Military stratagem would have been, okay, let's figure out how to cut off their supply routes, let's siege them, let's build up siege ramps, and all these other things. They didn't do that. They walked around the wall 7 times, and God caused the walls to collapse. But now we come to Ai. In chapter 7, we looked at this last week, they got defeated. Yeah, not artificial intelligence. It's confusing now. Yeah, AI, not AI. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a little bit different. But chapter 7, they get defeated by not artificial intelligence, but a town that has the letters A and I in its name, Ai. And the reason is, so there is some debate about this. I am not sure if this is entirely true, but at least the passage doesn't say that Joshua prays on the way in. But the stated reason, at least, that we know why they fail is when Joshua does pray in verse 6 of chapter 7, they've been defeated, and he's like, why, O Lord? Why did you do this? And the Lord responds in verse 10 of chapter 7, stand up, why have you fallen face down? Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant that I appointed for them. They've taken some of what was set apart. They have stolen, deceived, and put things with their own belongings. And it come to find out that it's Achan and his family that has done this. So God told them, when you take Jericho, destroy everything. Don't take any of the stuff there. Don't take any of the cattle there. Eventually, you will do that, but not right now.
Isn't it amazing? One family sinned.
Yes.
And the whole group ate.
That's right. That's right.
Huh?
That's right. Yeah,
That's
definitely
true.
related to Adam.
Right.
If Achan had only waited, Jericho was set apart just like the first fruits of the harvest were set apart to the Lord, and 1/10 of their belongings were set apart to the Lord. Jericho was set aside to the Lord in the same way. But when they do finally conquer Ai and the rest of the nations surrounding them, they are allowed to plunder those cities. That is part of what God is giving them. So it's the same thing as Adam. You can eat from any of these trees, Adam, not that one. I want to eat from that one. You can eat from any of these cities, Israelites, but not Jericho. And Achan's like, I want that one. So he and his family are killed. It doesn't mention his wife. It does mention his kids. According to the law, kids are not allowed to be punished for their father's sin. So what that tells us is the kids were involved in this. It was a whole family plot. Many commentators think the reason his wife is not mentioned is either she was dead already, or she was more likely she was not a part of it. She was probably telling him not to, or don't do it, or maybe didn't know, and it was done behind her back. But Achan and his sons are killed. So that's where we ended last week. That's just a little bit of a review, but it's good for us to realize that on our own, apart from God and in sin and not following him, that we get defeated. Not that we lose our salvation, but we get defeated. But we can have victory turning back to him. And that's what we see here. So we get the good side of it in chapter 8. So let's dive into this today here. So the Lord said to Joshua, chapter 8, verse 1, "Do not be afraid or discouraged." And he really needs that encouragement after that defeat. They lost a lot of troops in the previous battle of Ai when they were defeated, but now they're going back in. The Lord is reminding him, I'm going to be with you. Right? Take all the troops with you and go attack Ai. Look, I've handed you over the king of Ai, his people, the city, and the land. Treat Ai and its kings as you did Jericho and its king, except you may plunder its spoil and livestock for yourselves. If Achan had only waited. Isn't that true, though, how Satan deceives us? It's like, this looks so good, but if you'd only waited, or if you'd only followed God's law, or if you'd only... Yep.
This is what I want.
Yes. Yeah. I want it now. I want this. Yep. But then God tells him to set an ambush behind the city. And remember, Joshua is a brilliant military commander. There's no accident God chose him. But remember that encounter he had with the angel of the Lord, Jesus Christ himself. And he realized, this is the commander. I am just his servant. So while Joshua is a brilliant commander, he's taking order from his commanders. And so we see this here. So God now does this in a completely different way. In Jericho, it was walking around the walls. This is actually studied to this day by military instructors at our academies that we have, Naval Academy, West Point, this whole campaign right here. And I'll give you a brief glimpse of that kind of thing here in a little bit when we get to the next chapter. But for now, this is a very interesting, intricate military strategy that's employed here. So Joshua and all the troops set out to attack Ai. And again, this is a very strong city. It's near Jericho, and it's going to be the key for them to get into the land. They're basically walking through this corridor of mountains. Jericho would have to be the first one that they take. Ai would have to be the second one in order for them to get into the land. Otherwise, you're going over this very rigorous mountain terrain. So Ai knows it's coming. They've been preparing. And they are overconfident because they just defeated the Israelites. They defeated them, and the Israelites retreated. But now, let's see what happens. Joshua selected 30,000 of his best soldiers and sent them out at night. He commanded them, pay attention, lie in ambush behind the city, not too far from it, and be ready. Okay, so that's phase one, is 30,000 of his best troops are hiding behind the city in ambush. Okay? Then I and all the people who are with me will approach the city from the front. Okay? When they come out against us, as they did for the first time, we'll flee from them. Now, if you're in a city in these days, walled cities are incredibly difficult to take. The advanced siege tactics that came much later with Alexander the Great, that is way forward in our history. So this time period, you typically would stay behind your walls. So this shows that Ai is like, oh, here come these Israelite vagabonds again. Let's just get them out of here. So they charge out of their city. They're going to attack us. And what we're going to do is when they charge us, verse 6, we are going to run away. That's what he's saying here. That we'll draw them away from the city, and they'll say, they're fleeing just as before. And while we are fleeing from them, you men who are hiding in ambush are to seize the city. Okay? So it's a feint. The Lord your God will hand it over to you. After taking the city, set it on fire, just as follow the Lord's command. See that you do as I order you. So Joshua sent them out, and they went to ambush the site and waited between Bethel and Ai to the west of Ai. But he spent the night with the troops. And I think that's also interesting, right? Joshua is with his people. He's there in the midst of them. It's good for morale to be with the people. He's very smart with that. It's also representing Joshua, remember, is a picture of Jesus. And so his name is the same as Jesus, Yeshua. Okay? So he's there with us.
And when David didn't go out, it's when he got in trouble.
That's right. When David withdrew, he didn't go out to fight, as the kings should do. He stayed home in his fancy palace. That's where he fell. Good point. Yep. Verse 10. Joshua started early the next morning and mobilized them. And then he and the elders of Israel led the people up to Ai. All the troops who were with him went up and approached the city, arriving opposite Ai, and camped north of it, with the valley between them and the city. Now Joshua had taken about 5,000 men and set them in ambush between Bethel and Ai to the west of the city, and the troops were stationed in this way. The main camp to the north of the city and its rear guard to the west of the city, and that night Joshua went into the valley. So that's describing more intricate parts of how the ambush is working. We're not going to go into detail there, but there's lots of moving pieces here, basically. When the king of Ai saw the Israelites and men of the city, they hurried out and went out early in the morning, so that he and all his people could engage Israel in battle as suitable place facing the Arabah. But he did not know that there was an ambush waiting for him behind the city. And Joshua and all Israel pretended to be beaten back and fled toward the wilderness. And then all the troops of Ai were summoned to pursue them, and they pursued Joshua and were drawn away from the city. Not a man was left in Ai or Bethel who did not go out after Israel, leaving the city exposed while they pursued Israel. And then the Lord said to Joshua, "Hold out your javelin toward Ai, for I will hand the city over to you." And so Joshua held out his javelin towards it. And when he held out his hand, the men in the ambush rose quickly from their position, and they ran, entered the city, captured it, and immediately set it on fire. And the men of Ai turned and looked back, and the smoke of the city was rising into the sky. They couldn't escape in any direction. Remember all those intricate ambushes that were set up. Now they're pinned. When Joshua and all Israel saw the men in ambush had captured the city, and the smoke was rising from it, they turned back and struck down the men of Ai. The men in ambush came out of the city against them, and the men of Ai were trapped between the Israelite forces, some on one side and some on the other. They struck them down until no survivor or fugitive remained. But they captured the king of Ai alive and brought him back to Joshua. When Israel had finished killing everything living in Ai, who had pursued them into the open country, and when every last one of them had fallen by the sword, all Israel returned to Ai and struck it down with a sword. The total of those who fell that day, both men and women, was 12,000, all the people of Ai. Joshua,
all the people of Ai?
all the people of Ai. And this is the terrible
They
part.
only had 12,000 men,
12,000 men, women, and children is
Oh.
all included. Yep.
and he had 30,000 behind and
Yep.
5 in front, right?
Yep.
Huh,
Yep.
okay.
And many more. Israel's big, but again, fighting a strong mountain position with walls. If they had stayed behind their walls, that would have been a much harder fight. Of course, God is with them, so.
Yeah, right.
But this is how this one falls. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Setting fire to a city, I, in my mind, see the houses kind of like mud with timber interwoven in there. What could you really burn?
Good question. So there is a lot of stone, but often the roofs are made of thatch. So dried stuff, dried straw, and you also have a lot of wood in the roof materials. Some of the houses would probably have a combination of wood and stone, but what will typically happen is, all those roofs are burning, so at least there's something. So it's not like all of the rubble has been destroyed yet, or the base foundations, but all of the roofs are on fire.
Just basically something else.
Yeah, and then probably some of their stables and granaries and some of the other things probably were wood. But yeah, so there's foundations. Because then the other thing that happens, a lot of the places there, like Jericho is a great example of this, is when it was destroyed, they would just build on top of it. And that's part of the reason why they could do that, is because, a lot of it's still standing. And so you just build on top. And so over time, you have the hills of the cities get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so archaeologists can actually drill down into those and study the history of the sites. So.
That, we were in, Europe somewhere.
Mhm.
We saw help me out, Becky. We saw a place that you could look down and there was the remains of a city down there, and they had,
It was
Yeah.
the Roman remains of Paris, wasn't it?
yeah.
Yeah,
But
just
it-
in Philadelphia, you can look through a tube down into Ben Franklin's office.
Oh, wow.
It's below the street.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, there was
Yeah.
a place you could look down and see, like
Yeah, that was-
basement
That
stuff.
was in Spain, yeah.
Yeah, but it was just, cause you hear about that,
Yep.
of people, archaeologists finding cities upon cities upon
Mhm.
cities
Mhm.
down deep, and it was interesting to really see it.
Yeah.
And that's,
We don't have much, except over on the East Coast. We don't have a lot of stuff like that here because our
No.
country's so young. But like Jerusalem and Jericho, Jerusalem's probably one of the oldest cities, which is really fascinating. But Jericho, for example, you might have a hill like this, and you build buildings on top of it, right? Kind of looks like a gear right now, or teeth, or something like that. Comes through, you've got a battle that happens, the city is conquered, okay? So they're like, well, let's just build on top of that, okay? So then they, build other buildings on top of that. That one gets destroyed, but then the other thing they're doing is they are continuing to generate trash, and they don't have intricate sewer systems. So what's also happening is the land is beginning to rise up over time as well. And so over a period of years, you have more and more civilization that's built up. And so then archaeologists kind of drill down through here and then kind of see all the different
Yeah.
layers.
Something.
oh, it's just like getting in a privy, digging
Yeah.
down in an outhouse.
Yeah,
I love watching those videos on TV.
Like a Spain.
Well, they
If I-
did have, like in New York City, they had a city under the city.
yeah,
Oh, really?
yeah.
Well, beside Subway, you mean?
No, they're, below the subway is the city.
Oh,
Yep. Yeah, in big cities, you start to have stuff like that as you need additional room or other things happen or, yeah. But anyway, so that's a little bit, and that does pose a challenge where some scholars will say, well, this stuff that we're reading about here is not historically accurate because, we don't have a record of it. And part of the reason why is there's so many layers that they look at in Jericho. We know where Jericho is, but because they have dated other things wrong, they're looking at the wrong level. Because if you look, there is a level way down in Jericho where the walls have fallen outward, not inward. If you're attacking walls from the outside, guess what? They'll be falling inward. Okay? You don't hit, some of it would, ricochet back, but the majority of the walls are going to fall inward, like every other level in Jericho. But one level, it's outwards. And it says that the city was burned with fire. So even though rocks don't burn, they do get hot, there's ash and all of that, and you can see blackened rock at that level. The city is burned. The other thing that's very interesting is the Israelites were told not to plunder it. And so you see preserved remains of grain and other things that were left in the city. And that is the only layer in Jericho where that happens. And so, but they discount that because they're like, well, no, it would have happened here. So anyway, it didn't happen there. It's like, yeah, they have the same problem saying that the Exodus in Egypt didn't happen. They're like, there's no evidence of Israelites. They're looking in the wrong place. Mostly because they're looking in the wrong place in Jericho. So they said, okay, well, it happens here. And so they go back and they're like, well, there's no evidence of Israel there. But there is evidence of Israel if you go further down. Anyway, so
And
that
they
can be the
keep
problem.
finding new things.
Yep, that's right.
Oh, my.
Yep,
That really did help.
it did, yeah. All right, so they have finally conquered Ai here. They do kill the king. That's mentioned. I love this next part, though. They renew their commitment to the law. Verse 30. They built an altar there at Mount Ebal to the Lord, God of Israel, just as Moses, the Lord's servant, had commanded the Israelites. They built it according to what was written in the law of Moses, an altar of uncut stones on which no iron tool has been used. And they offered burnt offerings there to the Lord and sacrificed fellowship offerings on it. Okay, and so dedicating this battle to the Lord. And it kind of continues to review some of the things that we've talked about before. But that's the conquest of Ai. And so you see, as Israel is walking with the Lord, they receive blessings. When they are not walking with the Lord, they receive curses, just like we saw in the end of the book of Deuteronomy. Now, remember, God promised to Abraham, I'm going to give you all of this land. And it was detailed in Deuteronomy. We've seen the scope of what this land is supposed to be. So we would expect now that that begins to happen. But in the next chapter, chapter 9, we're going to see the first of many mistakes, sins really, that happen, that keep them from fully conquering the entire land. And so let's take a look at this one. Chapter 9. When all the kings heard about Jericho and Ai, those who were the west of Jordan in the hill country, in the Judean foothills, and along the coast of the Mediterranean toward Lebanon, Hethites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, or for short, the ites, they formed a unified alliance to fight against Joshua and Israel. Because remember, these Canaanite peoples, they're not just one people group. They're all these city-states, and they kind of have been for a very long time, but now they're forming a unified group here. So that could be a problem. When the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they acted deceptively. They gathered provisions and took worn-out sacks on their donkeys, old wineskins, cracked and mended. They wore old patched sandals on their feet and threadbare clothing on their bodies, and their entire provision of bread was dry and crumbly. Some of your translations might even say like worm-ridden. It's like really bad food, basically. They went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and the men of Israel, "We've come from a distant land. Please make a treaty with us." Right? So they're pretending they're from far, far away. Make a treaty with us, but really they're next door neighbors. Okay, so real quick, let's just look at this on a map. Make sure I get this right here. Yeah. Okay. Very, very rough picture of the Holy Land. So Jericho is right about here, roughly. Jerusalem, down there. Gibeon is right here. And Ai is like, not too far away. So these Gibeonites, and this, I'm not real great at scale. A quick map here, so this is probably a little bit wrong. But this is generally what we're talking about here, that Gibeon is really close, and they're acting like they've come from thousands of miles away. Okay? So they're going to try to make this treaty so that they don't get conquered
So
and
the
destroyed.
people didn't know?
They didn't realize it.
Huh.
How long did it take them for Jericho and Ai?
That's a good question. It seems like it's happening very rapidly. It's at like 7 days at Jericho, and it seems like it's just a couple of days from going to Ai, getting defeated, coming back, dealing with Achan, and then going back the next day. So it's
Because if they looked that worn out, they had to be walking since they were in Exodus.
yeah. It's I think this distance. I mean, it honestly wouldn't take very long. I mean, oftentimes you'd be able to walk quite a distance in this area over a period of a day, 2 days, something like that. So it didn't take them very long to
No, but
go
I
over
think
there.
if they wore out their sandals.
Oh yeah, wearing out
they
the
should've
sandals.
been from 40 years ago they've been walking.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's skip to verse 9. So they're talking to Joshua. Your servants have come from a faraway land because of the reputation of the Lord your God. I think it's interesting they don't mention like what land. They're just like, oh yeah, a faraway land, right? Like there's clue number one. We've heard of the Lord your God. We've heard of his fame and all he did in Egypt, and all you did to the 2 Amorite kings beyond the Jordan, King Sihon of Heshbon and King Og of Bashan, who was at Ashtaroth. So our elders and the inhabitants of the land told us, take provisions with you on a journey and go. Meet with them and say, we are your servants. Please make a treaty with us. And then they show the bread. They're like, look, our bread is crumbling. We're not neighbors. We're from far away. Look at these wineskins that are cracked, right? So Joshua established, verse 14. I'm skipping down here. The men of Israel took some of their provisions, but look at this, did not seek the Lord's decision. So there it explicitly tells us that they did not seek the Lord. So Joshua established peace with them and made a treaty to let them live, and the leaders of the community swore an oath to them. 3 days after making the treaty with them, they heard that the Gibeonites were their neighbors living among them. And just to shorten up the amount that we're reading here, you can skim through that if you would like. But basically what happens is they decide, okay, we're going to follow because we made a covenant with you. We are not going to kill you. But the Lord has given us this land. You will be our slaves in this land. Okay? So they now serve them. What's really fascinating, and it's been a couple of weeks since I've read this, but I believe that the Gibeonites show up many more times after this. And there's a bit of redemption to this story. Some of the Gibeonites are involved in the building of Solomon's temple. They do a lot of building projects. And so that's just kind of a look ahead when God's temple is being built. It's some of the Gibeonites who are serving and doing some of that. So,
Were the Gibeonites, did they do this to save their own skin, or did
Yes.
they do that, to try to attack them?
no,
Make them
they're trying to save themselves,
Okay.
which is nice. But so this is one of those things where it's like, okay, they're supposed to cleanse this land of idolatrous people. This is one of those things that could prevent that, because now this people group could be intermarrying with Israel and leading them astray into idolatrous practices. It seems like for the most part God saves them from that, where this turns out to be a good thing despite the fact that Israel should have sought the Lord here.
Right.
I guess I'm thinking like a contract today, you sign it, but if they lie to you in words, it's okay, but if it's in the contract,
Yeah.
then you can fight it. But they could say anything they want, but if you sign the written contract, whatever's in the contract
It's only
still
what's
applies.
Yeah.
Which is so weird. They lie, but words don't count unless it's written down.
Yeah.
But if they
Yeah.
make a contract with God, which the Israelites did,
Yes.
they can't break that because they already learned the wrong way.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if they
Yep.
didn't follow.
That's right. So now let's get into the back to the military campaign here for a second. So remember, we've crossed over the Jordan River to Jericho. We've now defeated both Ai and Jericho, and this is a very mountainous region here. So this is like a corridor to get into this valley area. Jerusalem down here is probably the strongest fortification in the entire area. It's a very ancient city, very difficult to siege, more so than Jericho, maybe. And the way that you would approach that, if you were going to take Jerusalem, you would need to start surrounding it and cutting off its supplies. And notice how Jericho and Ai are over here on the eastern side of Jerusalem. Gibeon is now over here on the west side of Jerusalem. And so this is the beginning of surrounding, because now, even though they didn't conquer Gibeon, Israel now essentially owns these areas. That's important for us to keep in mind for what happens next. Oh, and we've also talked about some of the kings in this area are beginning to form alliances, because they're like, they've made it through, right? They defeated these kings over here. That was a big deal in and of itself when that happened, because they're like, oh, okay, now our river is no longer going to protect us because the people guarding the river are gone. Now they've broken through the front door. Now they're starting to surround us.
Now, did the Israelites leave people in Jericho and leave people in Ai and go on, or?
You know, it doesn't tell us that specifically. They did start to settle down. Two of the tribes over here, I think it's Manasseh and Ephraim, they asked for this land as their inheritance. So I think their families are back here. But Joshua said, okay, this is your inheritance. The fighting men need to come with us. So they did not stay. Did they leave like some for protection? Probably. I'm
Yeah.
gonna guess practically they did. And so probably the same in a
Okay.
couple of these.
But if they totally
But-
destroyed the AI and totally
Yeah.
destroyed
Jericho.
Jericho,
That's a
would
good
they
point.
leave anything
Yeah.
to rebuild it?
It's a good
This
point.
particular time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
I don't know.
All right. All right, let's see here. Oh, yes, chapter 10. Now, King Adoni-Zedek of Jerusalem, you may recall Melchizedek, Adoni-Zedek, Zedek is like the royal title, heard that Joshua had captured Ai and completely destroyed it, treating Ai and its king as he had Jericho and its king, and that the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were living among them. So Adoni-Zedek and his people were greatly alarmed, because Gibeon was a large city, like one of the royal cities. It was larger than Ai, and all of its men were warriors. Therefore, King Adoni-Zedek of Jerusalem sent word to King Hotham of Hebron, King Piram of Jarmuth, King Japhia of Lachish, King Deborah of Eglon, saying, "Come up and help me. We will attack Gibeon, because they have made peace with Joshua and the Israelites." So if you're going to ensure that Israel does not totally surround you, you need to attack their new ally, Gibeon. Okay? So this situation of making peace with Gibeon has basically forced a bigger battle than Israel had would have had to face. So the 5 Amorite kings who had banded together joined forces and advanced with all their armies, besieged Gibeon, and fought against it. So the men of Gibeon sent word to Joshua at his camp at Gilgal, "Don't give up on your servants. Come quickly and save us." Okay, so now this is not a siege. Now Israel's job is to break the siege of Gibeon and defeat the enemies. Neat thing that God is doing here is, yes, it was Israel's sin that now Gibeon is just there. They didn't conquer it, and they own it, and now it's brought them into a greater war. But the other thing is God basically delivered, 6 different kings and their armies into this open area. So instead of having to go down into all of these other city-states, walled cities, and conquer them, God's just like, here, have all of the armies right at Gibeon. It's kind of cool. Okay, so verse 9, Joshua caught them by surprise. Oh, I skipped the important part here about the Lord. Verse 8, the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them, for I've handed them over to you." Literally on a platter, right? Handed them to you. Not one of them will be able to stand against you. So Joshua caught them by surprise after marching all night from Gilgal. The Lord threw them into confusion before Israel. He defeated them in a great slaughter at Gibeon and chased them through the ascent of Beth-horon and struck them down as far as Azekah and Mekkedah. And they fled before Israel, and the Lord, look, here's God fighting for them. The Lord threw large hailstones on them from the sky, along the descent of Beth-horon all the way to Azekah, and they died. So again, we see it's not just the people who are doing this thing. It's not just Joshua's brilliant military. It is God who's working with them. They still have to be there.
It even says that more were killed by the hail than
Yes.
by the sword.
Yeah.
By Israel's swords.
Yeah, more of them died from the hail than the Israelites killed with the sword. So God's really fighting, but they still had to be there. Still had to risk their lives fighting.
There's some other protection going on here. Doesn't sound like any of the Israelites got hit with the hail.
Yeah, good point. Right, and they're mixed right in there with them. Yep, good point. Now this is interesting because Joshua is realizing that he's got to be victorious here, because if he is, this is going to totally open up the southern lands because these big armies will be defeated. So he's got to have a complete victory here. So look at what he does. On the day the Lord, verse 12, on the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israelites, Joshua spoke to the Lord in the presence of Israel. "Sun, stand over Gibeon, and moon over the valley of Ajalon." And the sun stood still, the moon stopped, and all the nations took vengeance on its enemies. Isn't it written in the book of Jashar? So the sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed its setting almost a full day. There has been no day like it before or since when the Lord listened to a man, because the Lord fought for Israel. Then Joshua and all Israel with him returned to camp at Gilgal. And then we're not going to read through this whole section, but the 5 kings from these armies escaped, hid in caves, and Joshua's like, roll a stone and cover them in there. And then, so they're trapped.
Yeah.
He brings them out and kills them later. So that's what that describes. But we can focus here on the sun standing still, which is also incredible. So God does a huge miracle. Not only is he fighting for them, he's throwing hailstones. Love what you said, Dennis, about Israelites are not being hit, but now he extends the day for several hours so they can make sure the work is done. They get victory. Any other thoughts or questions about that and that amazing miracle there?
Now, has that one been reported? I know they figured out historically that the sun did stand, when Jesus dies and it went dark. They figured that out. I just didn't know if they.
I know I've read some stuff on this. It's not fresh enough in my mind to talk well about it. There's a lot of discussion on what happens. Like, is this some kind of eclipse? Is this some kind of, because basically what would actually have to happen from a scientific perspective is the Earth stops rotating.
Right.
And Joshua's describing it from our perspective, right? The sunrise and sunset. That's not an inaccuracy, because even if you read scientific journals, they talk about sunrise and sunset because that's how we talk about it, even though technically the sun's standing still. But the point is, like, God stops the Earth rotation or something like that. Wow. I know that people have written about it. I couldn't tell you the details of that. But, yeah, fascinating. It's also, they do make reference to an extra biblical source, the book of Jashar, and I believe that that is referenced somewhere else as well. I don't know that we have that book anymore, but I think it's interesting that this is documented in 2 places. So you have ancient eyewitnesses that have this documented in 2 places. If this were something we were making up, we would have just written it here, right? It would have been more legendary. This is also very typical of a miracle too, where it doesn't go into elaborate detail. It's just like, oh yeah, and Jesus made all of these fish and loaves. It's just like, wait, can we go back and talk about that? The sun stopped. Okay, wow, pretty incredible. Anything else on this? Feel good about that? All right. Those are the main narratives in Joshua. So we'll kind of move forward into a little bit of summary mode here and take the rest of it pretty fast, because there really isn't much more of material that we can get in and really dig in and study, but maybe some interesting things to take a look at. The southern conquest is mentioned in the rest of this chapter from verse 28. So because of those kings being destroyed, that opens up the entire southern front of this war. The dangerous thing, here's the other thing we didn't mention about this military campaign. What would happen if the northern kings up here and the southern kings down here both unite together to attack Israel? So the other thing that's happening, why didn't Joshua enter up here and work his way down? Because then both would have united. So he's cutting the land in half so they can't interact with each other. So then these, even though I believe these were the ones we read about earlier, that they've all allied with each other, they're now cut off and trying to assemble themselves. All these kings decided, let's attack Gibeon. Now they're all destroyed. So Joshua moves in here and conquers this entire region. So now Israel owns this. Then in chapter 11, he comes up here and attacks the north. Okay, so you have a perfect divide and conquer.
Where's
with God's help.
Gilgal?
That's a great question. Let me
I just
look
kinda,
at the map.
I'm picturing the little people.
Yeah, this I remember it's not a good position to be if you're a military commander. Yeah, it's actually right here. Because what he does is he conquers Jericho, Ai, and then he drives his army 40 miles out from his supply lines to build an altar to the Lord. If you're in enemy territory, you don't do that. But if you follow God, you do that. Because then what these guys could have done is they could have come right in here and cut off their retreat, and now they don't have their supplies back over here. Okay? But they didn't. God spared them from that.
Well, they didn't know that he'd done that. Right?
Also, he didn't know that. Yeah. All right. So the southern conquest is in verses 21 through 43, if you want to read about that. He actually returns back to Gilgal in verse 43. The conquest of the northern cities is discussed in chapter 11. We get a really great, there's a couple of verses maybe we could read here that I think are helpful to get a summary. So let's go to chapter 11, verse 6. And this is the continual theme here. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid." How many times have we heard that just today, right? "For this time tomorrow I will cause all of them to be killed before Israel. You are to hamstring their horses and burn their chariots." Oh yeah, I did forget to mention this. The ones in the north, in that area, have chariots of iron. So that's like having tanks come against you. It was the biggest military weapon that they had at that time. That's a very scary thing. When Israel does not have mounted forces, they have just infantry and probably slingers as well. But God delivers them into this hand. Check this out, verse 8. "Lord handed them over to Israel. They struck them down, pursuing them as far as Sidon and," I'm not even going to pronounce that one, a big name, "into the valley of Mizpah. They struck them down, leaving no survivors." Okay? Why the cruelty to the horses and destroying the chariots? Do you remember, some trust in chariots, some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God? There's two reasons. Number one, burn the chariots, burn all these tanks, because I want you to trust in me, God is saying, not in chariots. Because otherwise you could say, it was the chariots that gave me victory. The horses represented Egypt. In fact, when the kings come in a couple eras from now, the kings were not allowed to gather horses for themselves, and the people were not to gather horses for themselves because the best horses came from Egypt. And so it was like they were looking back towards Egypt. So it's not like God hates horses or anything like that. But to Israel, he was saying, don't take these horses, because that would be like you were looking back towards this land. I want you to trust in me. Okay? That's what's happening.
Also, if they didn't kill the horses, those people could have chariots again.
Also that. Yep.
And chariots that were there would have been used against them in the future by somebody
Yep.
else.
Yep.
Some practical.
And just as a side note, kings, there was a law of kings, which we actually, I think we maybe skipped over it in Deuteronomy, but it's in there. You can go and take a look at it. Don't amass horses for yourself. Don't amass treasure for yourself. Don't amass wives for yourself. Guess what Solomon did?
Yeah, it was.
And there's actually a section you can read about Solomon goes to Egypt and goes and gets a bunch of horses. Okay? He breaks all three of those. And the kings were supposed to, one of their first jobs as kings was to write that law down and memorize it and keep that with them. Oh, Solomon. Okay. So we have that conquest here. Let's see. Okay, we have a summary of the conquest in chapter 11, verse 16. And then let's look at verse 23, which is the end of that. Joshua took the entire land in keeping with all the Lord had told Moses. Joshua then gave it as an inheritance to Israel according to their tribal allotments. After this, the land had rest from war. And that's kind of, now, it is confusing then when you get to chapter 12, because now it's talking about more conquest. That's kind of a review of the entire thing. So it talks about what the conquest was over here, and then reviews some of this conquest as well. So this is just like, okay, we've reached the end of the detailed account. Then he zooms out and he's like, here's what happened overall. But I like that. However, that leads us to think, oh, they completely conquered the land. Lest we think that, chapter 13 helps us understand what they missed. So let's look at chapter 13 now. Joshua was now old, advanced in age. I like that. That's a nice way to describe him, right? Advanced in age. And the Lord said to him, you have become old. Like, I need to know that, God, thank you. Advanced in age, but a great deal of the land remains to be possessed. And this is the land that remains. And then he lists out all of these. So there were places that they had not yet conquered. Okay? Interestingly enough, and we don't know why, they have not conquered Jerusalem. at this point. It's not until David's actually the one that takes Mount Zion or Jerusalem, which is fascinating. I will drive out, so I'm skipping down to the end of verse 6. I will drive them out before the Israelites, only distribute the land as an inheritance for Israel, as I've commanded you. Therefore, divide this land as an inheritance to the 9 tribes and the half-tribe of Manasseh. And I'm not going to go through the details here, but you can find some great maps online. Maybe your Bible even has a map, as mine does here, where it shows you where all the tribes have their land, okay? And so that it describes the boundaries in great detail. And what I really like about this time around, I started looking at some of the boundaries that my Bible has in it and compared it to the text, and they've followed it really closely, right? That's where those maps come from. Here's this river where your boundary is, and here's this division right over here, and that they carved it out just accordingly. And I believe this is something that Moses mentions in Deuteronomy as well. He describes the land, so that happens as promised. All right. Let's pause there for a minute. Any questions or comments about that section? Feel good about that? Let's look at Caleb. Caleb is a feisty old man, right? Remember, he and Joshua are both old men at this point in time, but remember, he and Joshua were the 2 spies that said, we can take on this land. So he gets his turn to divide the land, and this is in chapter 14. Verse 6, the descendants of Judah approached Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and the Kenizzite said to him, you know what the Lord promised Moses, the man of God at Kadesh Barnea, about you and me. I was 40 years old when Moses, the Lord's servant, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to scout the land, and I brought back an honest report. My brothers, who went with me, caused the people to lose heart, but I followed the Lord my God completely. On that day Moses swore to me, the land where you have set foot will be an inheritance for you and your descendants forever, because you have followed the Lord my God completely. As you see, the Lord has kept me alive these 45 years, as he promised, since the Lord spoke the word to Moses while Israel was journeying in the wilderness. So that seems to indicate then that the conquest that we just kind of skimmed over there was about 5 years, because he spied out the land, they wander 40 years, and then they fought for 5, roughly. Okay? Here I am today, 85 years old. I'm still as strong as the day Moses sent me out. Wow. Wow. My strength for battle, so not just like I can walk around and take care of myself. My strength for battle and daily tasks is now as it was then. So here he says, now give me this hill country the Lord has promised me on that day, because you heard that the Anakim are there, as well as large fortified cities. This man's faith is incredible. Remember all of those giants the Israelites were afraid of? That's the reason they gave. Caleb's like, I want those cities. Give me the hardest cities in the north to conquer. I'm going to take them out. That's Caleb's faith at 85. Perhaps the Lord will be with me, and I will drive them out as the Lord promised. Then Joshua blessed Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and gave him Hebron as an inheritance. And therefore Hebron still belongs to Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, as an inheritance today, because he followed the Lord God completely. Hebron's name is Kiriath Arba. Arba was the greatest man among the Anakim. After this, the land had rest from war. And so each of these sections is kind of concluding, but it's like these miniature conquests that are happening here. And then if you want some details then about Caleb and Judah more specifically, chapter 15 is for you there. It's pretty fascinating, some of the details there and some of the people that they fight against as well. I want to see if there's anything else I wanted to call out there. I think that was kind of the main one. But any questions or comments on Judah's
When I was
Caleb?
reading about Caleb and Jacob saying, no, we can get him,
Mm-hmm.
I remember in that part of the Bible, God kept talking about Caleb,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden it's Joshua,
Yep.
who becomes, it's like, that's weird. It's like, you couldn't say enough about Caleb, and then Joshua got
Yeah.
it, and do we know why, I mean, between each one, or?
Yes, it's always interesting God just chooses whom he chooses.
Yeah,
And so Caleb's definitely a strong leader, but we see Joshua first, who's right there with Moses. And so Moses is clearly like discipling him.
okay.
And so that's probably something God instigated because he wanted Joshua to be that type of Jesus. But Caleb is still important,
Yeah,
right?
'cause
And
I
so,
just kept
yeah.
thinking it's gonna be, I knew it was Joshua, but it's like, why isn't it Caleb? Because
Mhm.
it's just like he went on forever about Caleb and.
Mhm.
But as you said, Joshua's a military man.
Yeah,
Right.
Yes.
yeah,
And he listened to God, but he was also military.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And think of it too, like Joshua's the commander of all the armies. Caleb's like one of the key commanders of Judah. And so you have all these tribes that are designated and they're fighting together. And so there's old man Caleb leading his forces and, you know, yep. And he's also a great picture of some of the kings that are to come. Caleb is.
he's
So.
just a picture of a good Christian man that
Mm-hmm.
just goes about life.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. He's not afraid of those giants. Yeah, that's a good application. Oh, so in case you were like, well, hold on a minute, where's that thing about Jerusalem mentioned? Chapter 15, verse 63. But the descendants of Judah could not drive out the Jebusites who lived in Jerusalem. So the Jebusites still live in Jerusalem among the descendants of Judah today. Today meaning the time of the author, okay? But then eventually, that when we read about David, we'll see him taking that. So that shows you how powerful Jerusalem was. But also, what some of what happens here is that there's some apathy among the people. And I believe we'll read about that towards the end of Joshua. So it's not just that God didn't help them do it. Remember, the people have to go too. God will fight for you, but you have to go. And so part of it was maybe they just were weak and they just didn't do it. Okay? All right, we have a bunch of chapters here. Chapter 16 and chapter 17 are about inheritances and continuing to divide the land. This is sometimes hard for us to read, but it's important to know that each of these lands were promised to them. And they were promised actually all the way back when Jacob is on his deathbed in Egypt. And he's like giving these prophecies to his sons. Some of the prophecies that he gives correspond to the way the land is, which is really cool. How he describes them, he compares some of them to animals, and you have those animals in these regions, or he talks about them being shipbuilders and they have access to seas and rivers and waterways. You know, it's really beautiful if you go and compare the prophecy that Jacob made, and that's being fulfilled here. But it's also fulfilling the promise to Abraham. This is going to be the land. And so this is a fulfillment. For us, I think the easiest way to really connect with this, unless you just really like looking at geography, is the inheritance that we are still looking for, that heavenly kingdom. And they are getting their promise here, and we're still waiting for ours. If God is faithful to this level of detail with them, how much more us? Chapter 18 continues. Chapter 19 continues. Inheritance after inheritance after inheritance. So very much like the book of Numbers here, long lists of details. Chapter 20 and 21 are unique. We've talked about the cities of refuge briefly before. This is if you commit a murder accidentally, like a manslaughter thing, like, you know, I accidentally hit someone with my cart, something like that. I can flee to one of these cities of refuge, and I am safe from the avengers of blood, the family members that might be coming after me. It's part of their legal system. You can read about it if you're interested in it. But that was something that Moses told them to set up, and here we see that being fulfilled. So no detail is left undetailed. Cities of the Levites. Remember, Levites are scattered among the tribes, so that's described here, where all of their cities are going to be. We also, in chapter 19, we skipped over, but we actually get like Joshua's homestead, where he actually builds a city, and he has his inheritance as well, so God is taking care of Joshua also. We get a good summary of all of these inheritances in chapter 21, verse 43. So if you just want, like, give me the quick version, here it is. The Lord gave Israel all the land he had sworn to their ancestors, and they took possession of it and settled there. The Lord gave them rest on every side according to all he had sworn to their ancestors. None of their enemies were able to stand against them, for the Lord had handed all their enemies to them, and none of the good promises the Lord had made to the house of Israel failed. Everything was fulfilled. That's great.
I have it's a, like a.
Yeah.
How did Israel end up being someone else's country, and then they had to restart it in 1948, and the Muslims have the Temple Mount?
Yeah. So that's a long question or long answer for that one. Let me
Yeah,
shorten
maybe
it.
someday we can, because I don't remember the history from 1948. I wasn't born yet.
I'll say it, the short version is this. When the Messiah came and Israel rejected the Messiah, the focus was no longer the land, even though the land was promised to them. The focus was on Jesus and what he was doing to, reclaim the rest of the world for himself and salvation in Christ alone. And he promised that their temple would be destroyed. And that temple was destroyed by the Romans in AD 70 when Israel had one of its many rebellions against them. And then from there, they began to be scattered more. So it's like a second exilic period. And basically what's began to happen is that God was showing Israel that your hope is no longer in the temple. Your hope is not in this religious, it was supposed to be with God to begin with, but it's through Christ. Now that land still belongs to them, and there's still those promises to be fulfilled, and that's now going to be fulfilled in Christ ultimately. And so they begin to continue to be scattered over time. Part of it was Muslim invasion was one that really kicked them out. Then the Crusaders were not kind either. They killed Jews and Muslims alike and continued to scatter people. And so they just became more and more fragmented. Yeah. Yeah. And then it was the Zionist movement after World War II, when Britain was kind of carving out some of the land, that they were like, hey, why don't can we make this work now and move back in? So anyway, short version. Okay, let's finish this up. We just got a few more minutes here. Chapter 22, the eastern tribes go back. Remember, they've been fighting out here. They finally get to go back and settle in their lands, back with their families. And then Joshua gives his farewell address, and we finalize Joshua. So we get to the very end here. Let me read you a little bit of what Joshua says. Look at verse 6 of chapter 23. This is his farewell address here. Be very strong. Continue obeying all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, so that you don't turn from the right or left, and so that you don't associate with these nations remaining among you. Do not call on the names of their gods or make an oath with them. Do not serve them or bow down and worship them. Instead, be loyal to the Lord your God, as you have been to this day. The Lord has driven out great and powerful nations, and no one is able to stand against you. One of you routed 1,000, because the Lord your God was fighting with you as he promised. So diligently watch yourselves. Love the Lord your God. And he continues kind of this same kind of thing. And then he says that he's going to be going away. He dies. And then, let's see here. There was one section that I wanted to read. Yeah, let's go to the very end of Joshua here. Last chapter, so chapter 24, verse 29. After these things, the Lord's servant Joshua, son of Nun, died at the age of 110. That is a ripe old age there. They buried him in the allotted territory of Timnath-Serah in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gash. Israel worshipped the Lord throughout Joshua's lifetime and during the lifetime of the elders who outlived Joshua, and who had experienced all the works the Lord had done for Israel. Joseph's bones, which the Israelites had brought from Egypt, were buried in Shechem, in the parcel of land Jacob had purchased from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of silver. It was an inheritance of Joseph's descendants. And Eleazar, son of Aaron, died, and they buried him in Gibeah, which had been given to his son Phinehas in the hill country of Ephraim. And so that just kind of concludes. The land is at rest. The period of conquest is over. But the question is, now that all of these leaders are gone, Aaron's son, the elders, Joshua, Caleb, is Israel going to continue to follow the Lord? And that's the big question when we get into the book of Judges next week. All right, that's it for this week. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for your word. I thank you that you are faithful to your promises. I thank you that despite sometimes the weird orders that you give us that don't appear to make military or financial or common sense, yet if you've asked us to do something or you've brought something into our lives, we need to still be faithful to you. Help us to do that, Lord. It's hard. Help us to remember, as you reminded Joshua and the people so many times, do not be afraid, for I am with you, or many of the other promises. That's not the only one. But help us to remember that. Help us to be in your word this week so that when we are afraid, we trust in you. In your name, amen.
Have a good family reunion.